So we acknowledge and pay respect to the past, present, and future traditional custodians and elders of this nation we call Australia, and the continuation of cultural, spiritual, and educational practices of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. We acknowledge Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander tribes were the first sovereign nations of the Australian continent. The Gadigal of the Eora Nation are the traditional, just need to scroll.
Oh. I was calling something.
The traditional custodians of this place we now call Sydney.
Listen, can you hear the sound of hearts beating all the world around? Down in the valley, out on the plain, everywhere around the world, a heartbeat Can you hear the sound? Laughter. All the world around. High in the mountains, down by the sea. Everywhere around the world, laughter sounds the same to me. Black or white, red or tan, it's the sound of the family of man. Whoa, we're laughing away. Whoa, we're laughing away. Whoa, we're laughing away. Ooh la 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 la, ooh la 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 la, ooh la 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 la, ooh la 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 la. Oh. Listen, can you hear the sound of singing? All the world around, walking through the jungle or on a busy city street. Everywhere around the world, singing always sounds so sweet. Black or white, red or tan, it's the sound of the family of man. Whoa, we're singing away. 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 Whoa, we're singing away.
O thou kind Lord, thou hast created all humanity from the same stock. Thou hast decreed that all shall belong to the same household. In thy holy presence, they are all thy servants, and all mankind are sheltered in thy tabernacle. All have gathered together at thy table of bounty. All are illumined through the light of thy providence. O God, thou art kind to all. Thou hast provided for all. Dost shelter all. Conferest life upon all. Thou hast endowed each and all with talents and faculties, and all are submerged in the ocean of thy mercy. O thou kind Lord, unite all. Let the religions agree and make the nations one, so that they may see each other as one family and the whole earth as one home. May they all live together in perfect harmony. O God, raise aloft the banner of the oneness of mankind. O God, establish the most great peace. Cement thou, O God, the hearts together. O thou kind Father God, gladden our hearts through the fragrance of thy love. Brighten our eyes through the light of thy guidance. Delight our ears with the melody of thy word, and shelter us all in the stronghold of thy providence. Thou art the mighty and powerful, Thou art the forgiving, and thou art the one who overlooketh the shortcomings of all mankind. Abdul Baha.
O Son of a Spirit, the best beloved of all things in my sight is justice. Turn not away therefrom, if thou desirest me. And neglect it not, that I may confide in thee. By its aid thou shalt see with thine own eyes, and not through the eyes of others, and shalt know of thine own knowledge, and not through the knowledge of thy neighbor. Ponder this in thy heart, how it behoveth thee to be. Verily, justice is my gift to thee, and the sign of my loving kindness. Set it then before thine eyes. Baha'u'llah, the Arabic hidden words. It is not for him to pride himself who loveth his own country, but rather for him who loveth the whole world. The earth is but one country, and mankind its citizens. Baha'u'llah.
Undisturbed shall our mind remain. No evil words shall escape our lips. Friendly and full of sympathy shall we remain, with heart full of love and free from any hidden malice. And that person shall penetrate with loving thoughts, wide, deep, boundless, freed from the anger and hatred. Occasions of hatred are certainly never settled by hatred. They are settled by freedom from hatred. This is the eternal law. Even he does not quote appropriate texts, much if he follows the principles of the teachings by getting rid of greed, hatred, and delusion, deep of insight, and with a mind free from attachment, not clinging to anything in this world or in the next, that the man is a partner in the holy life. Buddhist scriptures.
O ye who believe, profane not Allah's monuments, nor the sacred month, nor the offerings, nor the garlands, nor those repairing to the sacred house, seeking the grace and pleasure of the Lord. But when ye have left the sacred territory, then go hunting, if ye will, and let not your hatred of a folk who once stopped your going to the inviolable place of worship seduce you to transgress. But help, see what it moved. But help ye one another unto the righteousness and pious duty. Help not one another unto sin and transgression, but keep your duty to Allah. Lo, Allah is severe in punishment. The Quran.
Assemble, speak together. Let your minds be all of one accord. As ancient gods unanimous sit down to their appointed share. The place is common, common the assembly, common the mind, so be their thought united. A common purpose do I lay before you, and worship is your general oblation. One and the same be your resolve, and be your minds of one accord. United be the thoughts of all, that all may happily agree. Hindu Rishveda.
Let love be without dissemination. Abhor that which is evil. Cleave to that which is good. Be kindly affectionate one to another with brotherly love, in honor preferring one another, not slothful in business, fervent in spirit, serving the Lord. Rejoicing in hope, patient in tribulation, continuing instant in prayer, distributing to the necessary of saints, give to hospitality, bless them which persecute you, bless and curse not, rejoice them that do rejoice, and weep with them that weep. Be of the same mind, one towards another. Mind not high things, but condescend to men of low estate. Be not wise in your own conceits. Recompense to no man evil for evil. Provide things honest in the sight of all men. If it be possible, as much as lieth in you, live peaceably with all men. Peaceably with all.
In the mouth of the righteous is a fountain of life, but the mouth of the wicked conceal violence. Hatred stirreth up stripes, but love covereth all transgressions. In the lips of him that hath discernment, wisdom is found, but there is for the back of him that is void of understanding. Wise men laid up knowledge, but the mouth of the foolish is an imminent ruin. Judaism misled. O children of dust, tell the rich of the midnight sighing of the poor. Lest heedlessness lead them into the path of destruction and deprive them of tree of wealth. To give and to be generous are attributes of the wealth. Is it with him that adorneth himself with my virtues? Baha'u'llah, the Persian Hidden Words, 49.
My object is none other than the betterment of the world and the tranquility of its peoples. The well-being of mankind, its peace and security are unattainable unless and until its unity is firmly established. This unity can never be achieved so long as the counsels which the pen of the Most High hath revealed are suffered to pass unheeded. Through the power of the words he hath uttered, the whole of the human race can be illumined with the light of unity, and the remembrance of his name is able to set on fire the hearts of all men and burn away the veils that intervene between them and his glory. One righteous act is endowed with a potency that can so elevate the dust as to cause it to pass beyond the heaven of heavens. It can tear every bond asunder and hath the power to restore the force that hath spent itself and vanished. Be pure, O people of God, be pure, be righteous, be righteous. Baha'u'llah.
All prejudices, whether of religion, race, politics, or nation, must be renounced, for these prejudices have caused the world sickness. It is a grave malady which, unless arrested, is capable of causing the destruction of the whole human race. Every ruinous war, with its terrible bloodshed and misery, has been caused by one or other of these prejudices. Concerning the prejudices of race, it is an illusion a superstition pure and simple. For God created us all of one race. There were no differences in the beginning, for we are all descendants of Adam. In the beginning, also, there were no limits and boundaries between the different lands. No part of the earth belonged more to one people than to another. In the sight of God, there is no difference between the various races. Why should man invent such a prejudice? How can we uphold war caused by an illusion? God has not created men that they should destroy one another. All races, tribes, sects, and classes share equally in the bounty of their Heavenly Father. Abdul Baha.
O thou candle of the love of God, I ask God to grant thee by his favor and grace that which is thy utmost desire, that the closed doors become opened, the uneven roads become even, thy face shine by the love of God. Thy sides become brighter by witnessing the signs of God, that thou mayest attain spiritual joy. Eternal happiness and heavenly light, eternal happiness and heavenly light. O thou candle of the love of God.
A song for racial harmony.
thank you to the readers, and thank you, Siva, for the lovely music. And welcome everybody. So I'd like to introduce our speaker. Kim Chong is the Media and Community Liaison at the Columban Centre for Christian-Muslim Relations. Bringing skills from a career in print media, Kim is primarily responsible for producing their quarterly newsletter, Bridges, contributes to social media, develops promotional material for interfaith events, and general communications. As community liaison, Kim promotes the interreligious apostolate to the Christian community and grows relations with women of other faiths. She is a graduate of Sociology and Women's Studies from University of New South Wales, where her research interests focused on the lived experiences of dialogue in everyday life. She is also a mother of 2 young daughters. And I'd like to welcome Kim Chong to talk about unity in a COVID world. Welcome, Kim.
Thank you, Colin. Hello, everybody. Thank you for having me today and inviting me along to speak. I'm going to speak about unity in a COVID world. Initially, I was going to put a post-COVID world, but we're living with it. So I know we're probably sick of hearing with it. So, but hopefully today's talk will give you some hope. I would like to share my screen. I just have some very brief slides I thought it'd be nice to look at. So I'll attempt to do that now. Can everybody see that okay?
Yeah.
Okay. I might just set it up as a slideshow and see if that'll work. No? Okay, so that's clear for everybody. It's not, yep.
Yes.
Okay, so I would also like to start with an acknowledgement. And the acknowledgement I choose today is from an interfaith charter called the Sydney Statement, which the Columban Centre for Christian-Muslim Relations had a hand in producing. Youth Power is one of the centre's initiatives. It's an interfaith network for young people, and it's essentially their project. So I draw on this acknowledgement today because given we're all in our homes and meeting in various parts of Sydney, I thought it was quite fitting because it acknowledges all the diverse clans of all the nations of Greater Sydney. So as I said, this comes from the Sydney Statement. We acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands and waters of Sydney and its environs, the diverse clans of the Eora, Darug, Dharawal, Gundagara and Guringai nations. We acknowledge their elders past, present and emerging. We acknowledge the Aboriginal people's ancestral connection to country, their care for the land, waters, plants and animals over millennia, and their continuing contribution to society. Their spirituality of dreaming, expressed in place, song, story, dance, kinship, ritual, and law, has guided and sustained them through countless generations. They are the oldest continuously surviving culture in the world, and we commit to walk together with them the paths of respect, reconciliation, and recognition. So I'll just say a little bit more about myself and the work I do at the Columban Centre for Christian-Muslim Relations. So I've mentioned the Sydney Statement. I do ask that you have a look at that online. It is an interfaith charter and it's brand new. We produced it last year. It took us about 2 years to produce it. It had a grant from Multicultural New South Wales and we did it in partnership with Western Sydney University. It's called the Sydney Statement because there's a number of charters from around the world, such as there's the Washington Declaration, for instance. So Father Patrick, the director of the centre at the time, thought, well, why not a Sydney Statement? So while it seems a little Sydney-centric, it is actually an interfaith charter for everybody. I invite you to have a look at it. It's a list of values and principles and commitments to interfaith dialogue And what's unique about our city charter compared to others around the world is that it was developed by youth. So we went around to all the youth in Sydney and asked them to put together the charter. It also invites you to sign up to it if you so wish to add your name in support of the Interfaith Charter. So some of the other things the centre does is, Colin mentioned that I'm primarily responsible for the newsletter Bridges. That's free to subscribe if you would like. Youth Power, again, that's our youth arm of the Columban Centre, and Ryan Apongelan currently runs that. You may have met Samantha a couple of weeks ago. She'll be taking over from Ryan in the youth networking role. We also host the Abraham Conference every year with our partners, the New South Wales Jewish Board of Deputy, Affinity Intercultural is another one of our partners, Uniting Church, and others. And then there's a new group that I've only just started early this year called the Western Sydney Women's Interfaith Initiative. We had our initial meeting in person before lockdown had happened. I have a small committee at the moment of currently Sikh Christian and Sikh representatives, but we're hoping to grow that. So if yourself or any of the sisters that you might know are interested in joining our Western Sydney Women's Interfaith Initiative, feel free to contact me or have a look on Facebook. So thank you for those little plugs. Anyway, this is about the centre. Now, I hope that the name of the centre, Columban Centre for Christian-Muslim Relations, isn't misleading today. I'm not talking about Christian-Muslim relations today. I took this as an opportunity to speak about unity in a COVID world. I guess from a Catholic perspective, I should mention that the Columban Centre is a Catholic apostolate. It's an independent organisation. And the Columbans are a missionary order, an order of missionary priests, I should say, and interfaith dialogue is very close to their heart. And so when we're based in Blacktown. So I'm not talking about Christian-Muslim relations today. I am talking about unity in a COVID world through a Catholic lens. And in the last decade, Pope Francis has written 2 letters. The most recent one only came out last year. It's encyclical, or his letters to the bishops worldwide, and this one, and it was very much on human fraternity. So Pope Francis is very strong on interreligious dialogue and on calling each of ourselves brother and sister. But he's also very strong on calling the rest of the world beyond us human beings brother and sister. He wrote a letter, I think in 2015, if I'm correct, called Laudato Si. That's his letter on caring for our common home. It's the idea of ourselves as ecological beings and how we might take care of creation. And it's through this idea of fraternity, but particularly our fraternity with the natural world, that I'll be speaking about today. So let's begin. Unity in a COVID world. So, as we know, the COVID crisis, as Pope Francis has said recently in his letter, has exposed our vulnerability. It's exposed a world made vulnerable by globalisation of trade and travel, social inequities, effects of climate change, resource overexploitation, unsustainable production and consumption, biodiversity loss, and governance poorly prepared to respond to this crisis. I like to think that COVID, this pathogen, is not so much the cause of our current crisis, but a symptom. It's our symptom for our need to attend to and change that's long overdue, our political, social, economic and environmental problems. Obviously, I cannot tackle the whole world in all of that. These are just some of the broader issues I wanted to highlight. Times of rapid change, as I said, are overdue, but I do think it now presents opportunities for us to innovate approaches to rebuild societies in a more sustainable direction, and one that can enhance resilience to our changing condition. So I propose a question. Our question is, as we emerge from our lockdown ourselves in Sydney, how might we begin to think about how we will meet this time of immense uncertainty and change? And how might we imagine a COVID world, or a post one, hopefully, to look like? And I would like to say that my hope is that we will find ways to innovate and create a world that holds our humanity at its centre. And I would like to say that by holding humanity at the centre of change, I think we would be holding unity at the centre of change. And by humanity, I mean those qualities of our being that inherently know that we are first and foremost interconnected beings. We're relational beings first and foremost. And the qualities, or some of the qualities anyway, that uphold our humanity are dignity, life, gratitude, humility, respect, openness, solidarity. I mean, these are just a few of some of the values by which we unify, by which we live our interconnectedness. And as I had mentioned up front, importantly, we're unified not only with each other, but with the natural world, and because we are ourselves ecological beings. We're ecological beings physically, chemically, biologically, and spiritually. There is iron in our blood and calcium in our bones. And as one famous singer said, we're made of stardust. So I would just, I keep coming home to the idea that we as humans, we are part of this interconnected cosmic web of creation, and we need to live a paradigm of communion with all that is. And I wonder if we can review this time as a moment of renewal, and by an ecological conversion of sorts. And I think our faith and our spiritualities play a large part in meeting this world as a time of renewal. At the height of the global pandemic in April last year, so we were new to this and it was all hitting, and there were 3 periods of holiness occurred within days of each other in April 2020. That was Passover, Easter and Ramadan, as well as the sacred events for Baha'is, Buddhists, Hindus and Sikhs. And the sacred observances all shared the common message of renewal. It was to change the way we look at life in the material world. So I have to go with Pope Francis. I agree with what he says in the letter, and that our return to business as usual without a renewal to ecological sense of being will continue to impart our throwaway society, our indifference to wastefulness, and not just for food, but human beings themselves. I think we have seen, or we have heard, what has happened with some of the elderly in certain places in our world in the last 2 years as a result of the virus. And also, I feel at this point, as we come out of lockdown, the human sacrifice is being made for us to move forward. I think those percentages need to drop. So, of course, individualism and self-sufficiency, mass consumerism in a globalised market driven by competition and fear is no longer obviously sustainable. Now, sorry, I'm not going through my slides. So here we go. So St. Francis of Assisi, long ago, a patron saint of Catholics, patron saint of animals and ecology and peace, grasped this fundamental reality of ourselves as ecological beings. And he intuitively understood the importance of living not as a self-centred individual, but as part of the larger whole. He championed the art of living in deep harmony and community with everything that is. He called everything, including the sun, sea and wind, brother and sister. And so, we talk about this a lot, we're people of faith, and I think this is familiar to all of us and something that we attempt to live by each day. But for me, what was always interesting was how would this translate? I think often our interconnectedness and our experiences of each other in real, loving ways in a presence of God, I think of as not really very translatable sometimes. But I always found Martin Buber, a Jewish theologian, was very good at describing this. And he described the relational quality of what Pope Francis was saying in calling, the sun and the wind brother and sister. And I'm going to give the example that Martin Buber is very famous for, which is the example of a tree. It comes from a book of his called I It and I Thou. I guess the simplest way for me to describe this consideration of a tree that he talks about is that it's either an object of classification or a subject. And this is how I'm going to quote him, how he speaks of this. It is a little bit dense, so just bear with me. So he says, I consider a tree. I can look at it as a picture, stiff column in a shock of light or splash of green shot with the delicate blue and silver of the background. I can perceive it as movement, flowing veins on clinging, pressing pith, the suck of the roots, the breathing of the leaves, ceaseless commerce between earth and air, and the obscure growth itself. He says, I can classify it as a species and study it as a type in its structure and mode of life. I can subdue its actual presence and form so sternly that I recognize it only as an expression of law, of the laws in accordance with which a constant opposition of forces is continually adjusted. So I think what he's saying here is that, he can describe the tree, he can name it, he can classify it, he can give it labels, he can see it's got green leaves, I can see you have blue eyes. And these are just sort of rigid rules or ideas around things in how we describe or see another being. I think in that way what he's saying is that he's addressing the tree, or he's seeing the tree through his own reflection of what he understands the tree to be, through our own understanding of species and subtype, etc. And he continues, I can dissipate it and perpetuate it in number, in pure numerical relation. He says, in all this, the tree remains my object. It occupies space and time. It has its nature and constitution. And then it shifts, and he says, it can, however, also come about, if I have both will and grace, that in considering the tree, I become bound up in relation to it. The tree is now no longer it. I have been seized by the power of exclusiveness. So there's a different perception, there's a different mode happening here. There's a shift in the way that he's being with this tree, or seeing this tree through his own view initially, that we all have, and then something else happens for him. And he says, to effect this, it is not necessary for me to give up any of the ways in which I consider the tree. There is nothing from which I would have to turn my eyes away in order to see, and no knowledge that I have to forget. So in other words, we understand the tree as a scientist might, and that's all fine. But what he's saying is something much more holistic. He's saying rather is everything. It's picture and movement, species, type, law and number, indivisibly united in this event. So the way we sort of split and divide and demarcate things in order, because we need order, that's what makes us understand the world. I don't know how I'd be driving in circles if there were no lines for me to park my car, for instance. So we need these divides in some way in order for us to classify and understand the world. So he's not suggesting that we give up on all of that. But what he's saying is that it's part of a whole. There is more to it than this. So just to finish up, he says the tree is, okay, so everything belonging to this tree is in this, its form and structure, its colours and chemical composition, its intercourse with the elements and with the stars are all present in a single whole. So he's present to the tree now in its entirety. The tree is no impression on his own impression. It's no play of his imagination. It doesn't have a value depending on his mood, but it sort of bodies over against him, and it has to do with him, but in a different way. And he says at the end, let no attempt be made to sap the strength from the meaning of the relation. Relation is mutual. And I think what Buber is experiencing here is that he's starting to understand that he is much of the tree as it is in him. The tree lives in him as much as it lives outside in the way that he views it. That's his relational experience. and I think this is what makes us real to one another. There's a presence here, there's a presence in it, and I think a loving kind of view of this in this moment. And, you know, I'd go on to say that the tree in this relational condition is it's more than an object of envy or worship or desire. It's more than a metaphor, even for our own lives. It's not reflective of us. It's the tree in itself. And it requires a special kind of regard, the kind that contemplates the difference between objectifying, saying what it is, a subspecies, etc., and subjectifying the universe. It's no longer just an object of classification, even though we don't have to get rid of that. It's also a living presence of which he starts to feel bound to. And I think this unifying quality that he's describing, it's less possessive. It's just he's no longer attached to things. He's no longer attached to what he thinks the tree is in accordance to whatever science says or whatever he thinks he sees. And I think these sorts of attachments or the sense of possessiveness of what we know, what we think the tree is, in this sort of objectifying stance is what's leading to this appropriation and domination of our planet. And, you know, example would be we clear forests and we remove habitat. We're bringing wild animals closer to human settlements. We hunt and sell wildlife, often endangered, which of course increases the risk of transmission. Biodiversity is declining faster than at any time in human history. So I feel like we need to return to that part of ourselves, that inherent part of ourselves that lives without appropriation, that treating the world as an object, as a thing, as an it, can bring. And we must remember to live with nature as nature does. And I think for Buber there, it's got these layers of deep interconnectedness and perhaps a flowing boundary. It's like, for me, I love gardening, for instance. When I go I've got tomatoes just growing, and when I water them and I check them every morning and I see the flowers are coming, and then I see the flowers are turning into tomatoes, and I have my 8-year-old involved, and I ask her if she's gone to check the babies and watered the babies, and this is growth happening before our eyes. And you know, when I go out there in the morning to look at them, I feel them inside me, and I think that's the flowing, that's the sort of boundless flowingness of between me and the garden that's happening there. Okay, so let me move on. Okay, so we all like to do things and be active and say, well, how can we partake in this? And so I've got a slide here on some eco action. And I think sometimes for me personally, it can get a little overwhelming when you hear about all this news. Like, it's bigger than me, and it's a lot. So what can we do? And I suggest it doesn't have to be large. I think the rediscovery of our unity, of our interconnectedness with all things, of which we are, can simply be by forgiving oneself and others, first and foremost. And then there's some suggestions from Laudato Si, from Pope Francis' letter on caring for our common home. And they simply touch the leaves of the trunk of a tree, wonder about our relatedness. You can consciously listen to the song of the birds. I'm not sure if any of you have pets, but I feel like our pets are portals into interrelatedness and our interdependence. I take comfort from my pet as much as it does from me. We care for each other. And, you know, when you spend those moments with each other or with your garden or your pet or a sunset or whatever it might be, sometimes you do experience a palpable presence and love, just as there was there for Buber, I think, when he saw the tree in its wholeness. So I think also all the great religions of the world, all the spiritual moments, to include some form of Sabbath. And I think, you know, we're losing that sense of time in this 24/7 world. So it's a time set aside for prayer and rest from labour, and just an expression of gratitude for the gifts of creation. I think we can draw on inspiration from each other's faiths, as we did just at the beginning of this meeting, and just find those moments where we feel less spiritually alienated. You know, we live in a model that's economic and is of constant growth and productivity and moving forward, and we often need a Sabbath from that. I also think what might help is to turn to Indigenous wisdom. I quote from Laudato Si, Pope Francis writes, "Creation is ordered in a manner that all living species are provided for with their needs to survive and fulfill their existential purposes." Now, when I listen to this, it makes me think of the knowledge well known by our Indigenous people. And I think it's time that we listen attentively to their wisdom, because they see the land and country in terms of a sacred relationship of interdependence and reciprocity within our diverse web of life. I think now is the time for us to learn their ways of safeguarding Earth's delicate balance and the healthy conditions for life to flourish instead of endless extraction. For example, some of you may be familiar with this, before the invasion, Aboriginal people created a complex system of land management. For them, there was no sort of pristine, untouched wilderness. It was a patchwork of burnt and regrown areas, and fire was their biggest ally. In using fire, they could plan and predict plant growth, and with it attract animals for hunting. They converted the land to grasslands for the maintenance of animals, plants, and fresh drinking water. They also not only thought of kangaroos when they were doing this, when they were laying out their burn patterns, but also possums, wombats, birds, insects, reptiles, and plants. And I think once you have started to lay out country to suit a species, you're on your way to an extraordinarily complex arrangement of the land, which you must maintain carefully and over many generations. So burn patterns also consider plant cycles and prevent grasslands from overgrowing again. And then I was at a talk by Bishop Vincent Leong. He's the Bishop of the Parramatta Diocese, of which my office lives. And he quoted the French Jesuit priest and scientist and theologian Teilhard de Chardin. And it's a very fitting quote called "Unify or Die Out," quite a dramatic one. I think if we were to progress or evolve, we must embrace the general religious experience, which I think Martin Buber had done with the tree. It's a cosmic and evolutionary, and we must involve ourselves in it. Because I think religion is concerned with the whole of life. That's why it's holy. Universe, galaxies, Earth, other planets, human, and all forms of intelligent life. I love here, I should point out too, this image here, this is the 7 seasons that our Indigenous people follow. So typically we follow the European style of seasons with spring, summer, autumn, winter, but this is their 7 seasons, which I just love. I'm not sure if you can read some of that, but we've got orchid season, wombat season, it's cool, rainy days. So I love that. Okay. So I've just lost my page. Here we go. So to continue with the French Jesuit Teilhard de Chardin's quote and the idea of our relational wholeness of everything and this new sort of radical harmony, I feel like that if the nature of the universe is deeply relational, then it is time to recast unity with a cosmological framework. Meeting change and uncertainty is difficult. It's in fact painful because it requires relinquishing control in some ways. But I feel like this can also renew us. It can return us to the relational wholeness of everything and everyone. And that's if we, as I said at the beginning, keep humanity, unity at the centre, and then we can return home to ourselves. To do this, we must remember that less is more. We must learn to envision a new economy that shifts away from consumption and exploitation to one that celebrates interdependence and reciprocity within diverse webs of life. Only by taking less from the earth can we move to an alternative model of living in harmony and deep connection with the planet. So COVID has taught us that no one is saved alone. That's a quote from Pope Francis, Human Fraternity encyclical, and that the knowledge demands a new politics of inclusion and communion. It equips us to avoid both excessive individualism and aggressive populism that thrives on identifying enemies at home and abroad. Fraternity, whether with each other or with the earth, is the new frontier, I hope, capable of knitting together the competing demands of liberty and equality and, of course, unity. So I hope that wasn't too fast for you all. I should say too, if you have any questions, feel free to ask me. It doesn't have to be about the talk. You can ask me about the centre or our projects or anything of that nature too.
Thank you very much, Kim. That was very interesting and relates to a lot of things which come indirectly in our conversations in this group. And the focus on the ecology and that example of seeing a tree as itself, as valuable in itself. That's, I mean, most of us live in the city and we really appreciate a tree when we get to see one. And now we'll appreciate it more. So can I ask people to raise their hand if they'd like to speak and or ask a question? Questions and comments on the actual talk are always the most interesting while we have Kim here. Siva.
Thank you, Kim, for this talk. You gave a lot of information about your organization as well as human life, what it should be. The first question is, you said that anyone can join this Sydney Alliance. Is it Sydney Alliance? Yes.
No. The Sydney Statement?
Oh, Sydney Statement, okay. And the individuals can join, is it?
Well, it's not, it's an interfaith charter, so it's a document that outlines ways that we can practice interreligious dialogue with each other. And it's really, it sort of lists some values and some principles and also some actions. Would you like me to share the website? Would that be of interest?
Yes.
Yes, please.
Okay, I'll just bring it up. I'll share my screen again. Too many windows. Here we go. Can everybody see that?
Yes.
Actually, I've also got in front of me. So the Sydney Statement, this is where it lives. It's an interfaith charter for building bridges between believers from different religions. And so it's really a resource. It's a resource that anyone interested in interfaith dialogue or otherwise just getting on with their neighbours and friends can use. So this is the sort of cover page. And as I said, it was created by all these amazing young people. So Father Patrick is the director of the Columban Centre. He's front and centre here, not as young as everyone else, but he's young at heart. And then Ryan is the youth and networking coordinator for our centre. So he brings together young people of different faiths through youth power, I should say. Power is POWR, it's Parliament of the World's Religions. So each year we have an event, a youth event For the Sydney Statement in 2020 end of 2019 into 2020, we toured around the four corners of Sydney, the south, north, east and west, and had sort of workshops with young people to ask them how they wanted interfaith. People of different religions came together and asked them what the charter should include. So when you scroll through the first page, there's sort of the short version. So we've got a preamble, we've got an acknowledgement, the context, and then we have our values, principles, and then the commitments. And these are under the 5, well, there's 6 here, but it's really 5 different dialogues. Dialogue of life, dialogue of action, dialogue of knowledge. And when you, so this is a short version, but if you click, it will take you into, let's have a look here, it'll take you into the long version. And so these are the values with which, and some of which I shared with you today. There's also, when you click up, you'll hear about sort of our story and how we came together. And then there's all these other resources, all the interreligious organisations in Australia and internationally. There's articles. Then we've got further resources. These are endorsements that we received from community and civic leaders, from religious leaders and government. You can leave comments. I should add, you can actually download the statement in full as well for free. There's an A5 booklet. That's it there. I'm not sure if you can see that very well. So that will have sort of the version in print. But you can download these for free. And there's an A4 poster and an A1 poster. It's good for schools and places of worship and things like that. If you want professionally printed ones like these, you can purchase them. Otherwise, they're free to download. But our most important thing is that we ask you to sign up. And really, it's a pledge, as you can see. And all you would have to do is fill in some details. It's all private, of course. We don't spam you. This isn't about collecting your personal information. It really is just your pledge or support. So you would just read through it and sign up to it if you wanted to, and then we would ask that you share it with your friends, and then we have a little counter here. Who wants to be 200?
I think Ryan, what is Ivan, something like that? What is his surname?
Pongilin. Ryan Pongilin.
Yes, he was there. The Baha'is. Recently we had this conference.
Yes, he was.
He was there, and he talked about this. Okay. The power and the like.
Yes. That's so that's just something we've produced recently, or he produced with the. I mean, we produced it together, but it's the youth charter.
And you talked about a lot about Indigenous people, and you recognize them, and also about their wisdom. How much are these Sydney statement incorporate Indigenous component into this?
Well, I mean, it's quite a lengthy acknowledgement. I think where it does draw on it later on is during, let me find it. I think it might be in our principles. No, it's the commitments. I mean, it's not great. It's not a great amount. I mean, outside of, I mean, when we wrote, the acknowledgement took us a really long time to write. It was really important to us to get right. And we did share it with elders to ensure that it was, that it passed the test, so to speak. We do speak of the environment in the commitments, and I think we draw on it. We mention it there, but that's all I can recall. Yeah. I mean, we promote and live by the golden rule. And that was very important to us, that it also had on, and we actually have a poster by which we, share and that also has Aboriginal spirituality, dreaming, as a part of the other faith groups.
It's wonderful.
Yeah, I think it's been really great that it's starting to be recognised more and more for its wisdom.
Yes. Thank you.
Ahmed, you're next.
Yeah. I wonder whether I've got your talk right, that you're advocating for a transformation in grassroots, so that we can live in harmony with each other and the nature. Is that the case? Do we need now, or are we at a turning point where there is a need for transformation?
I think it's hard. I hope it's the turning point. I mean, I don't know. It's a really hard one to address. I think for me, it's just the place to return. I think we have to keep. I think what I'm talking about today is in our interrelatedness as a whole. I'm really just talking about the wholeness, and I think that's always come first. That's inherent to who we are, and it gets lost. We lose our way, and I think we have to remember to keep returning to that. I'm not sure. I feel like it lives there. That undercurrent is there, but we have to return to it. Rather, I don't know if it's so much a transformation as it is just a coming home.
Maybe materialism has taken us away from that spiritual life that our past nature was there, and now we've lost that.
Yeah, I think that's the challenge every day for all of us, and it is really just serves as a reminder to for me personally, in the everyday choices I make, and what I want to the sort of fundamental sense of what and who we are, and try to just recall that in the decisions that I make. And it's hard. I drive a car to Blacktown every day. But I do hope that, I think at the centre of the bigger decisions that are being made, it is about progress and economy and moving forward all the time. And it does we lose this centre. This is our centre. And I just hope that COVID is going to help us recall that, it is a sort of a renewal. It's always living there. It's who we are.
At the beginning of your talk, you asked the question, what has COVID done to us? And I was watching news, and they were saying on the news that 33% of people are now rethinking their lives, and they want to leave their jobs and transform their lives into a different life.
Yeah.
And that probably was the effect of COVID.
Yeah. I think, because we've had to suddenly do things very differently. It's been much more difficult for some than others. I, for instance, have been able to continue to work because a lot of my work's on computer. I can continue to work digitally, and
Same here.
Yeah, so I'm been very mindful and grateful for that. But yes, it is getting people to rethink. I think because we've had to sort of slow down and stay at home with our loved ones, hopefully safe homes, and at least for us in Australia and in Sydney and in a somewhat privileged society that we live in, you sort of do rethink being part of the rat race and whether or not you want to slow down. And I know this is definitely, I work full time, I'm a working mum, and this has definitely had given me more time with my family and my children. I have not gone back to the office full time since the first lockdown in 2020, and I'm grateful for that. It does make you rethink how you want to live your life and what you care about. It's made us all think about living simpler. I certainly liked the simplicity with which this has brought me. You know, you can't go out. There's no, you know, out and about and shopping and whatever might else. I could do very little other than, you know, help my kids with homeschool and do my job with the centre and tend to my garden. And it did simplify my life a lot. That's, you know, I can only speak for myself in that instance. But yes, I've been hearing the same thing. I think a lot of people are rethinking their lives. But I don't know where it's going to lead. I still think this is early days yet. I think this is going to, you know, if it is a rethinking and a transformation, even if in the way that we work, I hope it brings some more balance to people's lives in a positive way. Yeah.
Yung, you're next.
Hey, thank you very much, Kim Chong, for your paper.
Hi, Yung.
You give us a very new perspective into your thinking and research. Unity in the COVID world. You know, in last week newspaper, they were talking about because of the stay-at-home order and COVID lockdown, a lot of women have frozen their eggs because they just want to produce children at a later day. Because of the COVID lockdown, they couldn't go out and go to the club or talk to the men. So therefore, a lot of women have, used the medical procedures to freeze the egg. Now, what this make me worry, I don't know how many of them are feminists, because I study feminist study and social media and everything. So I just wonder, I was worried that in the near future, when all the kids are come out by IVF or by COVID injection or whatever vaccinations, they will become like different human beings. They're not conceived naturally, what I'm saying. So therefore, and in your talk, you talk about we have to hold humanity in the center of change and of transformation. So how are we going to hold humanity in that sort of environment where combined with the human factor, we also develop artificial intelligence, mechanism like, robots and everything, and we cut down all the trees, we cut down all the connection with earth and sky and animals and human. We think everything in commercial way of life, business and commercial. So this is, for me, is a worry. And the other thing that if you know about the French bourgeoisie, they all moved to the countryside during the COVID-19 lockdown and terrorist time because they don't want to get bombed in the city. So they are moved out to work in a farm because they're so rich, they don't want to be bombed in the city. So if you go to Paris, according to the social media, you see Paris and all the major cities are empty because people just hide themselves in a farm, whether they do it in a spiritual way or they want to do it in a safety way. It's a real life of COVID. And I talk about a racial superior. If you study about the final solution that related to the Jewish people, then you see some countries, they think that their people are superior, racial superior than other race. But in the future of post-COVID, we will have a new sort of race. The races of the young people were born whether through IVF or, like not normal, not natural. I mean, not conceived in a way that God gave us. The way that men and women and kids were born, in a natural way, but through the tube, medical tube. And the vaccine will be like keep going, keep changing. People will have boost, people different kind of vaccinations. Just like imagine you go to a school ground, one day in the near future, you will see some people unvaccinated, and they probably will need to wear a mask to identify themselves that they're not vaccinated. And then that is not unity. Because the ID will say, oh, you have to wear a mask because you haven't been vaccinated. Just like we create a scenario that way. So how we call it as unity?
I don't know, Young. I mean, this is the difficulty, isn't it? I mean, it's just, it's hard. I mean, I don't have the simple solution, obviously. Well, in some ways, I think it is simple. Look, my work in Christian Muslim relations, part of my work is often to give talks to the Christian, predominantly Catholic, because that's what we are, Catholic communities, on Islam and on interreligious dialogue. And, I'm part of a lot of interfaith groups, just like yours, and we are sort of preaching to the converted a little bit. But when we, I do meet some people who have some real resistance to people of other faiths, for example, who don't want unity because of their fear, and they fear their fear of the other. And it's also, and I have to sort of live with that. And I often come across people who can say some quite offensive things generally, that discriminate against people because of their faith, or a racist or something of that nature. But I have to remember that I also have to be in dialogue with them, which is probably the hardest thing to do, because often what you hear is, bordering on hate speech and really hard to hear and really unjust. But if I start, and I can feel my shackles coming, I can feel the blood sort of rushing up my hand, and I can feel sort of myself getting angry, and I have to go, hang on a minute, I've had a talk to this person, they've come up to me after a talk on interreligious dialogue or Islam or something, and they're a Catholic, so they identify with me, and they've trusted enough in me to speak out, to say, I don't agree with this and I don't like what they do, or But I look at this person and I think, well, you've made the step to come to this talk. So there's one thing. The other thing is, like I said, I have to remember to remain in dialogue with them, as difficult as it may be, as offensive as I might personally find it to be. I have to be respectful and I have to be open to them. And there are just some people who you can't reach. And by reach, I don't mean, I have to be very careful that I don't try to turn them to think how I think, because that's not what dialogue is. It's actually the antithesis of dialogue. But it's just, I think reaching them is just, in some ways, I'm not saying this is easy by any means, because it can be, and I mean, this is just in my day-to-day life. I can't talk about extremism and all the rest of it at this point, but it is just about letting them feel heard. And I think with my job, I don't feel like I can change anybody's, my role is not to change people's minds. It's not to make them more righteous, or to be in a way that I think would be better for all of us, or for myself, or whatever. It's more just about planting seeds. So I feel like that's the best I can do. The best I can do is give the right information, give what I feel is the correct information. So there's a lot of misinformation on Islam and Muslims, for instance, which comes out of fear. It comes out of fear from what you see in mainstream media, for instance. People will think the Taliban is Islam, and it's not. It's more political folly. So I'm going to expect a rise in Islamophobia because of what's happened in Afghanistan at some point. So our role is just to try and provide the best information possible, whether it's on Muslims or Islam and their practices, for instance, to a Christian audience, for instance. And that's the best I can do. I can just plant seeds and hope that I've remained open and respectful, despite my own, I do personally struggle, like you, Jung, with some of the choices that people make, particularly when I feel like they're irresponsible ones and that they're hurting other people. It's very, very hard. But, sometimes I don't always get it right. I get mad as well. And, I'm just human. and I find it, and I sort of wonder, maybe I find it more challenging than others, given the work that I'm doing, the work that I've chosen to do. There's something in me that needs addressing because, I struggle with the injustice so much too. So, I don't know. I wish I had more answers, Jung, but I think for me, often what it comes down to is just fear. For the women freezing their eggs, they're fearful they're never going to have a family. They're fearful they're not going to meet somebody. They're fearful they're going to be alone. I don't know what their personal reasons are, but I do think fear is what dominates. And I'm sure, what I'm saying is nothing new. You guys only have to switch on the news.
Thank you very much for that. Because you see, all your talk is about green, all your talk is about ecological beings, and all your talk is about human. But with the way that you see the COVID running, it's not the same theory that you want to promote. That's how I see it.
As we're saying, COVID is a big challenge. It's an opportunity, I suppose, but as we're saying, the challenge isn't over yet. Perhaps there's a lot more.
Yeah, I think it's just drawing to attention those vulnerabilities that were already there.
No, thank you for helping me to see a tree differently. Growing up in parks, there was a tree I could climb, and I loved that tree. And so I do love trees. I've just forgotten about them temporarily. ABC television had a series called My Place, which was all based around a tree. And the tree was there when before the Europeans came. And then every 10 years, they have a new story based around this tree. It's a really wonderful series. And so we can see a tree differently, seeing a person differently. How do you manage that? You said that you're involved in Christian-Muslim interfaith dialogue. Is that all at a kind of a rational level, or are you actually able to see each other differently?
Well, that's the hope, and that's the work. I think, that all we can do is try. We don't always get it right. There are challenges. Palestine is probably the most recent one, because even though we're Christian Muslim relations, we do partner with many other faiths. But I think when it's done, I think it's not really something, dialogue's not something you can will a whole lot. I think you can only really just create a space and opportunity for it to arise, hopefully. And I think people who are involved in interfaith already, like I said, we're already sort of, and people who are involved in interfaith are often very, very passionate about it. So it's often not hard in that instance, because people really do want to get to know somebody from another faith at a very real level. And so they come in very open-minded. I think it's reaching those who maybe haven't been exposed to it so much that find it more challenging.
Have there been any prejudices which someone's overcome because of your efforts?
I don't know, to be honest. I hope so. It's hard to say because we sort of share what we have and then, you know, leave it with them, really. I like to think, you know, I mean, it's like the seed metaphor really works for me because some take and some don't. And I think, you know, it's just about tending to those so that there's some growth. But, you know, some people, it can be very, very difficult for people to open up to another when they are so strongly entrenched in their own identity, when their identity is challenged. If they're really entrenched in it, it can be very frightening and painful for them. I don't come across that a whole lot. You know, our work is really just about bringing people, it's very social, it's about bringing people together and having a nice time and learning from each other. You know, we know that we can only do so much and sometimes it only goes so far, but you got to keep going.
Yeah, I think it's worth the effort. Zoe.
Yes, hello, thank you, Kim. I just want to know that how do you like, because you said you work with young people, what's their reactions about this COVID and their future? Because I feel that for older people, I mean, still everybody's life is affected, but young people are more, I think. How do you see it?
Well, Zara, I can't really answer that because it's Ryan who works with our young people, and he did just have a event just the other night, actually, and I haven't had a chance to talk to him about it. So Ryan's our youth networking coordinator, and he works with 18 to 35-year-olds. So I can't really say directly, but I think as a mother, I think my children are primary school children, but I have friends whose kids are teens, for instance. They found it very, very difficult because they've had a newfound independence. They're getting older. They're sort of leaving the nest, so to speak, and then all of a sudden they're in the nest. And the fact that they can't leave or see their friends, I think they've found it very hard, at least from the stories that I've heard in passing. But on the whole, with youth, Ryan would be better to ask that question, Zora, I'm afraid. Yeah.
And how do you see the ratio of the Muslim in this group, in your group? Are they mainly Christians, and if you or the Muslims are just come to the country from like Afghanistan, or have they lived here as Australian Muslim?
Yes, I mean, the Muslim community is really diverse, actually. So they're communities. There's kind of not one community, they're communities. And they come from all over, and some are second, third generation, like from Lebanon, Afghanistan, from the subcontinent, of course. So it's actually very diverse. Turkey, you know, Egyptian. Yeah. They do tend to, the communities do tend to be unto themselves a little bit. So even the dialogue between them, it's the same for the Christian community. The dialogue between us needs to happen as well.
Thank you. Thanks.
Ahmed.
Talking about trees, I'd like to share an experience that I had with my plants. Like Kim, I have a small garden and I try to care of it. And my experience is this, that I have been making an experiment, and by touching the stem of the plant or the leaf of the plant, and if you do that, you notice that all the plants are cool to touch. And as soon as they die, they lose that coolness. And I'm wondering whether this is a spiritual thing inherent in these plants, where they cool the whole world by that, or it's kind of an inherent thing in them that this coolness is kind of lovely feeling when you get that, when you touch the tree or when you touch the stem of a plant or the leaves. I wonder whether you had the same experience or not.
I mean, yes, I think it's probably one we've all had at some point, even, you know, the smell of a flower or seeing a flower bloom for the first time. You know, I mean, people talk to their plants, they sing to them, they wipe them clean. But it seems so simple and silly in some ways, but I think that's I think if we really sat with that for a minute, we'd actually really feel that there is something spiritual in that, because it's not about the gardener or the plant, it's what's between the two of them. You don't have a gardener without the plant, or a plant without the gardener, in that sense. So I think people, you know, I interviewed gardeners many years ago, and there was one woman who I spoke to, and she wasn't of any faith that I could tell, but her experience with her plant, she had a balcony garden, and she'd come home from work and she'd tell me she would sit out there just to be with her plants. And there was something very calming and meditative and obviously spiritual about it, though she might not have framed it that way. So I think that's the relational quality that we are. You know, it's what's happening between them. You know, it's not just the plant and it's not just the gardener. It's both at the same time. And that's the unity. That's the quality that lives inside us at our center, I think.
I think the air we breathe is all coming from the plant. That is a very direct relation between plants and humans. Our life is dependent on the plants.
That's right. It's what gives us breath and
our
oxygen.
life. Yeah.
And I chose that image of the tree I had in the slides. I really liked it because its branches, in the way that it was looking up into the canopy, it was almost like a lung. It's like if you looked at a diagram of a lung, we branch in the same way, in the way that we breathe.
Harry.
Yes, dealing with the nature, I think the indigenous people around the world, they are much closer to the nature and they can interact with the nature very well. And I think Baha'u'llah said that every creation in the whole universe is a door leading to God's knowledge. So that's very interesting. Probably the COVID gave people to have more interaction with the nature. I want to share a sort of this is, my daughter sent this on WhatsApp. The reason why dogs don't live as long as people, according to a 6-year-old. People are born so that they can learn how to live a good life, like loving everybody all the time and being nice. Well, dogs already know how to do that, so they don't have to stay long.
That's amazing. Who sent that to you?
My daughter sent it to us in the group, but I felt that the animals are actually teaching us. Animals, not only animals, the creation is teaching us what our purpose and what we have to do. So I think we can learn more from the indigenous people as well.
And children, I think.
Yes.
I think she's a great philosopher already. I think children are fantastic philosophers, actually, and they know how to put it in such a simple and succinct way. Yeah.
Thank you.
Remember to lower your hands when you're finished. And Jung, I think you're next.
Yes, I said that when I heard your explanation about the trees and the garden and the green, I was, my mind just automatically was thinking about new economic zone, a new economic zone that where all the political leaders will want their citizens to move to the countryside to be more productive, like to grow more rice and crop and harvest and, apple, potatoes, all sort of agricultural product with the irrigation canal got to be built up and everything. So, I mean, it's good for people who will not want to live in a city during post-COVID-19 and want to move to the countryside to struggle a little bit so they can understand about unity and they can be close to God, because once they labor so hard, they will just want to lie down and sleep and not talking about unity anymore. And we're not fighting, we're not struggle, we're not do all this like political riots and everything. So that will be a very good propaganda. Political propaganda. Because if you study politics, that's how, like President like Mao Zedong, the Chinese, the Mao Zedong leader, ages ago, and all that Russian people, the Russian leaders, and everyone in that sort of socialist countries, they will try to promote the green, like green energy, green land, greenhouse, green area, building, new green pasture, everything. So they move the people, decentralize people down from the city to the countryside to be more productive. So they don't have to pay much welfare because they haven't got welfare to pay.
Well, I think it depends on the intent, Yung. So I think that's one way someone might approach it, but I'm not sure that's not much different to our current economy, where it's about production. It's about production and progress of a different kind, I think. So I think for me, I'm just talking about the intent, our intent in our day-to-day lives and the way that we go about our lives, even in the cities, with each other, or, there's no easy solution, obviously. But I think it depends on the intent on your relationship with the land. For some, it would be just about what you've described, production and the avoidance of welfare. But I think, it is, for others, it can just be a reconnection to earth, to soil, to the seasons, to a different sense of time. We in the cities, we all do this. We live by clock time. My job's 9 to 5. My kids are at school from 9 to 3:30. I've got to make sure I'm home to pick them up at 5:30, or it's by clock time. But I think, and you don't have to move out to the country to do it. I think some people do move out to the country to do it. It can sometimes bite them in the butt because they have quite an idealistic idea of what it means, and then they get out there and they realize it's just hard work, and it's not particularly convenient. It doesn't have the conveniences of living in a city, for instance, and it's they're in love more with an ideal, with a fantasy of what living on the land is than what actually living on the land is. But I think for me, it's just the intent of what's with us in time and place. I think nature can give us a different sense of time, perhaps. It can make us more present. It can let us forget about clock time for a minute. If you just like this, to give another garden example, like the woman who would come home from work and she would sit in her balcony garden, because it would bring her back to the sense of now, to a sense of presence. It's she's not living in the past and she's not living in the future. It's just what's here before her. So if you tend the land, for instance, but with intention, it can maybe bring. So I always when I think of farmers, there's a painting can't remember, it's a famous artist, the name escapes me, but it's the Angelus, and it's a couple, and they've been they're hoeing out in the field, and there's a very blurry sort of steeple in the background, and you know that Angelus bell has just rung, and they've stopped to take a moment of prayer in the middle of hoeing. So I think it's just the intent.
Thank you. Thank you.
That's okay.
Sorry, Kim, you had a slide there where it was saying as a heading, unite or die out. I wonder whether humanity, I wonder whether humanity has reached to a point where either we now come together with various races and various religions come together and bring a unifying concept to humanity, and then develop a new civilization now, or die out. What's your opinion on this?
It's a bit apocalyptic, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Gosh, I don't know. I've heard people speak about this in podcasts and things like that, and people talk about trying to save the planet and all the rest of it. And I sometimes think, gosh, we need to save ourselves. Like, the planet's going to go on and regenerate. It's our species that's going to extinct itself. But that's pretty dark, and I think death, there is a literal death, like, that we're all clearly aware of. But I think death for me sometimes can also just mean change. I think, just trying to think of an example for a moment that's not, as literal as that. But I do think it's, I do think it would, sorry, I'm bumbling a little bit. I think death can come in all sorts of forms. It can be, it can just be it can be a marriage. It can be, it's just, I think, fundamental shift and change. I guess Sharon's quote there, die out, it does sound a lot like, it's the end. But I feel like, there can be deaths when we lose ourselves. Like, there's a spiritual alienation that goes on. That can be a form of dying out. When we're sort of disconnected from each other all the time, or living for ourselves all the time and forgetting about the others, or, this idea of competition and one-upmanship, and just, and just that sort of self-centeredness, I think can be a form of a death of something, a loss. It's a loss of some form.
If others could formulate your questions and raise your hands, we've got a few minutes left. And while you're raising your hands, I just share my thoughts that I really liked a sentence you said there. We need to live in a paradigm of communion. And it seems to me the tree is a good analogy of that, getting back to trees, because if a leaf says, well, my branch is better, that's a bit pointless. Or if a leaf says, I'm the most beautiful and I'm the top leaf, I don't actually need this tree, I think I'll just drop off. Well, it won't last long. So really, there's something, some analogy there in the tree, a little bit like humans. We need each other, and we all fed from the same spiritual source. All right, who else? Well, Siva.
Yes, I think when the quotation was unite or die out, I think it doesn't literally mean that we are going to die out, but it is deterioration of the conditions. I think Colin read the quotation. In your reading, there was a statement. It said that the well-being of mankind, its peace and security unattainable unless and until its unity is firmly established. So if you don't have unity, we will not have peace and security and well-being. So that is the meaning of that. That we will die out means we will have wars. We will live here and yes, break down in any other relationship, whatever we have. So that's what I wanted to comment. Anyway, I think we are getting closer to 9 now.
Sorry, can I add on what Sivo said? When we say that unite and we die out, I guess the meaning is that like a drop of the rain, when it joins the ocean, it disappears, but it's not die. It is not anymore exist as an individual, but it is exist as a unity. So that is means that dyad as one, but joined to the bigger things. So that's my understanding. Thank you.
Yes, I like that. That's a very nice way of putting it.
You know, Abdul-Baha has got a metaphor that says a garden of flowers with same color is not as nice as a garden with multiple different various flowers with different colors. And that is valid for humanity. If we look at humanity in that way, where we have various diverse colors and races and languages as parts of that garden, as a single garden of humanity, then we would have a better view of the humanity as a whole.
Well, thank you, Kim. That was really very helped to reframe our thinking. And of course, there are many challenges the world has, and some of those challenges are very destructive of culture and unity, such as wars. But COVID, at least, is helping us, I think, as you said in the beginning, helping us to recognize our oneness. It's a common enemy, and we're all seeing how we deal with it. It's showing us some of the weaknesses in governance and in the way we see each other. Anything else you'd like to say, Kim?
Oh no, I'm just so grateful that you invited me to speak today. So thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming and joining us, Kim.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kim.
Thank you.
Thank you. So we can.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kim. Thank you, Siva.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Okay. Good night, everyone.